Okay, good morning, everybody. I want to touch on a few things first before we dive into the lessons for today. First of all, I want to remind you that if you are not reading your announcements every week, please do that. You'll get an announcement reminder, and it's just something that I'm posting every Monday that reminds you of important due dates and checkpoints and how all that works, and any type of information that you might need for the week or the coming weeks is posted in those announcements. So please make sure that you're reading those. Once we get closer to final exams, there will be a lot of important and good information on what your final exams and how that process is going to work in the spring. So just make sure that you're checking and reading your course announcements. Okay. So we're going to start in lesson 2 today, and building on what we've done last semester, we're going to start with talking about how we run a responsible business. And at the end of this, this unit, we're going to touch on human resources and their role just a little bit, and then we're really going to dive into that a lot deeper in the coming unit. So just to take you through this, and kind of touch on some things that are very important when you get ready to do your text questions. And then there's a project at the end of this unit that I want to go over some information I think is going to be really helpful and give you some resources that I think will help you when you get ready to do the project. So to start with this morning, let's start with lesson 2, and it talks about running a responsible business and the importance of safety. And I want to touch on this because I think this is something that if when you're out and about in town, or maybe you can even talk to your parents about it, this is something that I really think that you can see if you start looking for it. So for example, it's just talking about safety in the workplace. And safety in the workplace is dependent on two things. It's dependent on the employer, but it's also dependent on the employee. And so it talks about the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and we're going to kind of get back to that, and we're going to look at that website a little bit later. But it talks about, if you'll notice in this, it talks about the employee, and it talks about the employer, both. So here's the employer and what the employer is supposed to do, and here is what the employee is supposed to do. So it is important that they both have a role in keeping the workplace safe. And one of your questions, one of your text questions is going to talk about that. And so I want to give you an example of why and how this works with both of them. So for example, let's say that you have a plant and there's a hard hat area where employees are required to wear a hard hat. So that would be part of the employee's responsibility. Now, maybe the employer's responsibility is, say, to put up a hose or a ladder. That's something that they need to be sure is happening each time. And so they both have a responsibility. Well, if an employee, say, trips over a hose and hits their head and gets injured, and they get injured and hit their head because they didn't have a hard hat on. So who is at fault? Whose fault is that? And that would be the fault of both of them, because the employer didn't take care of making sure that the hose was put up properly, so the employee tripped over it. However, the employee is at fault in that scenario because they were not doing their piece of the responsibility and wearing the hard hat that they are required to wear by their employer. So I want you to, it's easy, I think, to jump to the conclusion that it's just the employer's fault, but I want you to make sure that when you get to some of these questions later, you're really thinking through both sides, and did both sides take care of what they needed to take care of to keep the workplace safe and to keep the employees safe. Okay. It also talks in here, let me see if I get down here to it. It goes back in here a little bit more, talking about, gives you some good examples of how employees need to stay safe. It talks about the Occupational Safety and Health Act, and just what that does and what that how that monitors safety And then it goes through and talks about specifically, you have equipment, you have heavy lifting. It goes into crime, and it talks about ways that that employers try to keep employees safe through each of these things. And I think and a lot of people, when they think about safety in the workplace, their mind immediately goes to equipment and machinery and things like that. But there's also keeping people safe from crimes, from, what happens if there's a robbery, or, you hear of carpal tunnel syndrome, making sure that people that type all day, that their wrists stay in good condition. And so employers spend a lot of time and money training their employees on how to be safe in these areas. And I just want you to take the time to read through this, because when you are an employer, you are going to take the time, and you're required to take the time to make sure that you're keeping your employees safe. And they spend a lot of money on that as well. Okay, let's move on here to lesson 3. And we're just going to build on that in lesson 3 with, but we're going to expand it to include the environment. And it talks about the Environmental Protection Agency. A lot of you may have heard of that before. And what I want to do, I want to come over and I want to visit that website in just a moment. But I want you to think about how businesses impact the environment. And, beyond just trucking companies and the gas that they may use in their trucks and the pollution of that. But I want you to think about ways that maybe you don't think, maybe just think about ways that they impact the environment. And one example lately that's been in the news and around social media a lot has been straws. There's been a lot of talk about the impact of straws, plastic straws, on the environment, because we throw those out. We don't tend to recycle straws, and we throw them out. And the number of straws that people go through in a day even is just astronomical. And the impact of that on the environment is becoming significant. And so that's one thing that would be something, if you're wanting to look up some things that impact the environment, straws would be a great one, because it has definitely been in the media a lot lately. And you'll notice that a lot of times businesses lately are not offering, they don't just give you a straw, you may have to ask for it. So that's one way. But I want to come over here, and I want you to look here. This is the EPA, and you can see the website up here. It's just epa.gov. And there's a lot of really good information about how they monitor the safety of the environment, keeping the environment clean and safe. And so I want to go here. Let's see. If we go to laws and regulations, we can click by business sector. And so this is going to tell you how this impacts businesses. And it has some of the bigger businesses here: agriculture, automotive, utilities, transportation, oil and gas. Those are the ones that definitely come to mind. But I want to draw your attention to this one over here called dry cleaning, because in your critical thinking questions, you have to think about how dry cleaners impact the environment. And if you're at a loss and you're not sure off the top of your head, coming up with some ideas, here are some good ways that they impact. So you can click here, you can look on compliance, you can read about laws and regulations. It talks about just different ways that they are going to impact the environment, and ways that they can do better, ways that they can have a positive impact. And so I want to draw your attention to this website. I'm going to let you read through that. This is a really good way, some good information if you need it when you get to that critical thinking question. Okay. So it's talking about, in here, it talks a lot about styrofoam. And how much, we used to use styrofoam when I was growing up, and you went to McDonald's and you got a hamburger, it came in a styrofoam container. And now it comes in a paper container, essentially a paper container that would be biodegradable, because styrofoam is not biodegradable. So every time you think about it, it just stays there. It doesn't break down. So imagine a business, a fast food chain that use styrofoam cups, imagine the impact that would have on the environment, the thousands and thousands and millions of cups that they may go through in just a week or two. If it's a big business and it's, worldwide or nationwide like McDonald's, the impact that that could have on the environment. And so companies are trying to be more environmentally conscious and these days, and so you see a lot of switch to paper. I've noticed in traveling recently that, going back to the straws, that they are using, I was given paper straws a lot in some of the bigger cities that I was in, and I think that's just those companies trying to be more environmentally conscious and helping the environment with what they're choosing. Okay, and so it's just going to go through and it's going to talk to you a little bit about ways that you can be socially responsible to help the environment. And you're going to have some discussion questions later on at the end of the unit that are going to talk to you and have you think about ways that companies are socially responsible, ways that you would suggest that they be socially responsible towards helping the environment. And so keep that in the back of your mind as you're reading this. Okay, let's see. We're going to go on and talk about lesson 4. So lesson 4 is going to be more about business ethics. And we've touched on this a little bit in the past. We're going to get back into it a little bit in the future. This module 6, unit 6 here is kind of setting us up for the rest of the semester. So we're going to touch on a lot of things that we'll dive deeper into later. So this is talking about business ethics, and business ethics really is just, it's making the right choice. It's being conscientious that you are being paid by an employer and not taking advantage of their time. Not, we think about if you take a long lunch, well, did that really hurt anybody? I really wasn't busy at work, but really you're robbing your employer because they're paying you for time that you're not there. If you show up late every day, they're paying you for time that you're not there. You are robbing them. And so it's going to go in, it's going to give you some scenarios and have you think a little bit about business ethics and about being honest. It talks about integrity. It talks about honesty. Businesses that have an employee that's honest, that's filled with integrity, they are going to, they're going to keep you as much as they can. They're going to want you to be their employee for as long as they can. They're going to give you more responsibility because integrity is something that is a very big quality that employers look for in their employees. Okay. It's also going to talk about privacy. So businesses need to, on 2 different levels. Number 1, they need to guard your personal information. You need to make sure that anybody can't walk in and get access to your social security number or maybe even some of your medical records. That is important that they keep it private. But, there's also things they need to keep private, like maybe why you were fired. They may not be able to share that they certainly don't want to share that with their employees. But you're going to have some questions later on and some things that are going to make you think about ethics and what needs to be private and what doesn't need to be kept private. And so there are things that businesses can share and there are things that businesses cannot share. And so you're going to be able to go through this and think about those different things and think about what can be shared and what can't be shared. All right, and then I'm going to go over here to lesson 5. And this is going to get into human resources and what human resources, what their job is, and it's so much more. I mean, when we think about human resources, a lot of times we just think about they hire, they fire. That's their job, is to just manage the employees and write the job descriptions and get people through the hiring process and things like that. Well, it's really much more than that. Human resources, their job is just their job is more than just recruitment. I'm sorry. And I'm trying to find where I was wanting to go on here. So here it talks about the application process, that they write the job descriptions, that they, issue the compensation. But I want to come down here and talk about professional development. This is one of the biggest things that Human Resources does, is they provide education to their employees. And so professional development is very specific to different types of businesses. For example, in education, if you are a teacher or a principal, you're going to have a different type of professional development than, say, an accountant would have. And so that is part of the job of Human Resources, is to develop that professional development, to train you in certain things that you would need to do, and so that you know what to do in the business and what you can and what you can't do. So that is a big piece of this with professional development. One of the things, going back to what we talked about just a few minutes ago with privacy, is they're going to help you know what you can keep private and what you can share. My rule of thumb has always been, if I'm not sure, don't share it. If you're not sure, keep it to yourself. You can't get in trouble for keeping it to yourself usually. So if you're not sure if you can share something about somebody, just keep it to yourself. All right. Now, I want to wrap up. That should get you through. Lesson 6 is just going to go back to lesson 1, that example that they gave with Google, and talking about how Google sets up their recruiting process, and then how that's just, lesson 6 is going to wrap that up. So I'm not going to touch on that because it's a really good example I want you to go through. I want you to read about. But I want to come over here to the Department of Labor website, because you're going to need this for the project that you're going to do at the very end. Once you get through the questions in the labs, you're going to do a project. And your project is going to have you thinking about posters that would be put in businesses. And you're going to give either a video or a Google presentation based on these posters. And so I want to give you some resources for where to find some of these if you're not sure, and give you some examples of where you can go. Okay, so if you go to the Department of Labor website, which is dol.gov, and then if you click on topics, you can go down and you can click on posters. And it is going to, it did not load up very well. Let me see if I can give it just a minute. Here it goes. Okay. So this is going to give you workplace posters. It's going to have you in your project. You're going to imagine that you work for, let me pull that up to make sure I'm telling you this right. So basically, it's going to have you imagine that you work for the Department of Labor, and that you go from business to business and talk to them about ethics in the workplace. All right. So your text questions are going to cover more just the basic information from the lessons that we went through, and your project is going to have you kind of think outside the box and imagine that you work for the Department of Labor. Okay, and so it wants you to talk about a couple of examples for each of the different things listed. You're going to talk about employee honesty and the importance of honesty, and that goes back to talking about integrity. And then it's going to talk about what to do if you see somebody that's acting unethical. What should you do? What do you do? Do you go to that person? Do you go to HR? Do you go to your boss? What do you do? And it's going to have you think about that and come up with some ideas on things like that. And then it's going to also talk to you about management and how management shows their employees that they value ethical behavior. And we talked about this a little bit last semester, about the importance of management setting the role, being the role model and setting the tone of a business. And so it's going to kind of build on what we started last semester with that. But this is a great website for the Department of Labor with the posters that you're looking for. And then I would just encourage you to explore. Really neat, lots of really good information. Here you have employee rights. It talks about job safety and health. the Family Medical Leave Act. There's lots of really good information on here. And I want to just show you on this one. So if you were to click on one of these, and then you can click on the poster. And if you come down here, it will tell you some of the requirements for the posters. And you can click on it, and it will actually give you an example and one that's actually printable. And this is not one that you're going to be using for your project. I want you to do the research and look and find those from this website on your own. This is a different one, but this is talking about job safety and health. And these are posters that employees or employers can go out and they can go and print these and they can put these up in their workplace. And so I want you to think about as you're out in town and maybe you go to the restroom and you see posters that are posted in there, or maybe you're in a business, a dentist office or a doctor's office, you may see posters that are posted in there that talk about employee safety. And so I want you to ask your parents that work, what kind of posters do you see posted in your business? What do you see? What are you required, to see? What do you read every day because you walk by it daily? And what kind of professional development are you doing? What are your human resource? What are they officers? What are they talking to you about when you have to meet with them, when you have professional development? And I want you to think about that. And I really encourage you to keep your eyes open as you're out in the community, because you're going to be surprised how many different types of job requirements you're going to see posted in the community at different places that you visit for different types of jobs. And I think that's something that will be really interesting when you start looking for it. All right, let me go back over here. So check out this website when you get ready to do your project. I think it will be really helpful to you. And I'm going to scroll down here to your text questions. Okay, so here's your text questions and your critical thinking questions. I think we've covered most of those. The Costco question is that's in that first unit. It's an example that they give you. It's a really good one. And I want you to read through these. And if you have any questions, or you're not sure where to find something, or you just have a question about, you don't understand it, send me an email. My email is posted on the landing page. And I'm going to take you back over there very quickly. I can get that up. Okay, if you haven't, check this out. So here's my email. You can email me if you need something. There's a little video about me. But contact me if you need something, if you have any questions. Just a reminder that if you submit something you don't do well on it, if you will send me an email and let me know that you've gone back through it and what you have learned, what you would do differently the next time, I will reset it for you. And remember, you get 3 reattempts on anything. So if you have any questions or anything, just let me know. I hope everybody has a great day, and I will hopefully hear from some of you soon.